Charlotte Griffiths, Miss G-string, Prince Harry's little bit on the side, all of a sudden is starting to drop truth bombs. Do you think it is because we've now all read the messages and we do have the proof of what she had been saying behind the scenes for years, that there was this relationship with Harry, and of course she does have a particular insight?
Charlotte Snuggles is no longer feeling snuggly anymore, clearly. So, I mean, she could be slightly angry and peeved that not only did she keep this relationship quiet for a large number of years, which she could have easily solved. I think it's more that Harry tried to destroy her career by not only calling her a liar, but by also saying in court that she obtained information illegally. He accused her of criminal acts. So if Charlotte now is suddenly, singing like a canary, I can't blame her. And I actually say good for her. In fact, I see more and more people coming forward now because people just no longer feel the need that they should hold back and respect Harry's privacy when he respects absolutely no one else's.
No, true. I mean, this, Tash, in particular was to do with Prince William's coronation, which is obviously a sensitive subject because if you talk about it, Tash, does that mean you are acknowledging the mortality of King Charles III, who is going through this monstrous cancer battle? But Charlotte Griffiths did decide to go there to reveal that Prince William has absolutely no intention of his younger brother being at that event. And that would be a seismic moment, Tash, because that would be saying it's done. It's over. Forever. There is no way back. It's a bit like if you don't invite one of your relatives to your wedding, But anyway, this was all part of her ongoing royal commentary on GB News, which is now quite a pro Harry and Meghan channel. So I do find it weird. And I will also say, Tash, I find it weird that she, on all of her mainstream media platforms, including Palace Confidential, the Daily Mail and GB News, she hasn't spoken at all about the messages or been asked about the messages because, Tash, I adore you, but just say a whole load of messages between you and Prince Harry had emerged. I don't think I'd be able to have you here and just pretend like it's business as usual. Do you know what I mean? Like we'd have to talk about it. Yeah. Well, we just have to talk about it though, right? Just to be honest. And I do find it weird that there's almost this weird complicity of silence. Like, oh yeah, like we didn't all see that Charlotte Griffiths and Prince Harry were probably shagging. It's just anyway. But look, even though this is stuff that we have been reporting for a long time, it's very relevant when it starts seeping out into the mainstream media. William hates Harry. That's big. William will not have Harry at the coronation. And actually, finally, an acknowledgement, and I know you feel a bit queasy about this, Tash, and I do understand there is a big debate about it, but finally, an acknowledgement from the mainstream media too, that at some point we are going to have to deal with this because Charles's health is really not good. So over to you. I mean, there was a lot to pick up on there. What do you make of it all?
Right. So first of all, let's start with King Charles. I have been reading the excerpts from Hugo Vickers' new book, Queen Elizabeth II, A Personal History of Her. And there is a segment in there where he actually says, and I think he is definitely telling the truth, that Prince Philip, there were rumours back in 2008, but it was quickly squished. But he said that Prince Philip was actually fighting a secret battle with pancreatic cancer that was inoperable for 8 years up until his death. And whilst I don't like, obviously, talking about this, but I do feel that perhaps pancreatic cancer, it does tend to run in the family. And we know that King Charles's cancer isn't something he can have an operation on, that he's not had chemotherapy to go into remission like Catherine. There is a very good chance that he has developed very, very similar. So there is obviously the possibility. And to be honest with you, the pictures of Charles, he doesn't look a well man. And I do see definite signs where his health does look worse. And that just comes from the type of drugs and ongoing cancer treatment. So, yes, whilst I always was like, nope, I'm not talking about it. After reading the segment that I did, it does make it a lot more believable that the king would potentially have a much, much shorter life than
Yes,
what we expected.
although if we keep on that sort of train of thought, Tash, Prince Philip survived for 7 years. So
Exactly.
Look,
It's not a
I've been
death
very
sentence.
honest with my reporting about this. I do try and be sensitive, but Charles will live with cancer now for the rest of his life, and that cancer diagnosis is terminal, but medical technology is incredible. It's just a question of how much he wants to push himself. So for example, Tash, my understanding is that in order to get through this state visit to the USA and Bermuda, there will be a stop in treatment. That's obviously not something that doctors would usually recommend. But clearly, if you're king, you know that it isn't possible just to do nothing, because you have to be seen to be believed, as Queen Elizabeth II always said. So there's those sorts of trade-offs. But Tash, what about Charlotte Griffith's language in terms of the relationship between Prince Harry and Prince William? Because you do have to admit she has a lot of the inside track, and we now know why, from Prince Harry's friends about what is really going on between the two brothers. And for her to just drop the word hate so casually, and also say categorically that Harry ain't coming to the coronation. I mean, that is huge, Tash, because there is no going back from that. I believe her, by the way. That has been my reporting, but I just think it's significant coming from her.
Okay, so where I look at it as, and I have done for a long time, Prince William is done with him. He is done with him. I don't think there's any coming back. When you think about how Prince William has always been, he's always had a tight circle of friends. And it's always been a known thing with Prince William. If you betray him, you're out. That's it. It's done. And that's with his friends. And Harry hasn't just done one thing. He's done lots of things. And a lot of it has been lies. And he's attacked his wife. He's brought his children into it. We only have to look at Harry, how bitter and vengeful he is towards his brother. He was glaring at Prince William and Catherine at the Queen's Jubilee in St. Paul's Cathedral. There's a photograph of Lady Sarah Chatto looking at Harry, almost in shock at the pure venom that was on his face, like a child. I've never seen an adult man glare like Harry does. And he did exactly the same inside the church when it was the King's coronation. There are photographs there that you can see with your own eyes of Harry glaring at his brother, watching his brother. Harry, in my opinion, should be kept well away from the children and from William and Catherine. He has proved not to just betray his brother, to hurt his brother. To me, I think he's proved that he's almost unstable with his hatred and this blame. He seems to have focused Prince William is the cause of everything. And it's turned into something that I wouldn't blame Prince William if, when his father's gone, he actually gets a full restraining order against Harry. And, you know, it's gone from something more than just a sibling fallout. So, yes, I absolutely believe, Charlotte, that Prince William will have nothing to do with him. I do not think there is any way that Harry can come back after what he's done. And let's also not forget that with the King and Catherine's diagnosis with cancer, Harry still to this day never once said anything about Omid Scobie's revelations inside his second book, which we know was, again, directed at Catherine and William, a lot of it. It was done on purpose. The leak was done on purpose. And he has never put out a statement to say about those conversations. So he allowed Catherine and the King, despite going through cancer treatment, to be labeled as the racists, pushing that narrative that they were somehow being cruel and unkind towards his unborn child. He's a vindictive, nasty man, and I wouldn't have him anywhere near my family.
Very well put, Tash, absolutely. And I think that restraining order will be absolutely necessary. Prince William won't have to go through formal channels, but I imagine his security and his police protection will be told, that man stays away from my family and my children. There's not going to be any sort of like we bump into each other type thing at the palaces. I think there's going to be a whole load of toughening up that goes on once William does take the throne, whenever that is. Now, Tash, the other moment of the week that I want to discuss with you, because it's sort of been overshadowed by what came later in Australia, was this truly deranged stunt over the weekend where Meghan Markle showed up at Ted Sarandos's event for the Netflix show Beef. And the pictures were truly deranged.
Oh.
And she also thinks we're like totally stupid, Tash. But some people seem to be buying into this. So Billy Bush, who's a big-time American entertainment correspondent who's now gone independent with his show Hot Mics and does quite a lot of coverage of Meghan Markle. I don't know if he was being facetious here, Tash, but I just want to show you what he had to say, because either he's being sarcastic or he's got it totally wrong. Give Billy Bush credit and say that he has been totally facetious and sarcastic there. What do you think?
I'm going to go with the same. I've watched quite a few of his clips, and he's actually got that real dry humor that I can imagine is actually some of it is lost on some Americans because they don't get our sarcasm. But he does have that sort of dry wit to him. And just listening to that, yeah, I think he's saying that that's the show. That's how it was meant to look. Look, they're classed together. Look, he's showing his big smile. This was a real publicity moment. That's the image that they wanted to get. That Meghan is still very much in with Ted Sarandos. Never mind the fact that he has a lawyer every time she calls. Never mind the fact that he unfollowed her. You know, it's quite clearly obvious that they are close. They are so close, in fact. Meghan is trying to climb inside of Nicole Avant's dress with her just to be that close. And yeah, no, I think he is being facetious. I think it's that over-top acting, isn't it? It's Hollywood. Everything is fake. Everything is done over the top. I mean, that wasn't just like a joke. That's Meghan like, funniest thing in the world. You know, it's fake. And that is that world. It is, of course, completely
and Tash,
fake.
You know, my immediate take on it was, Meghan, you just got played because Ted Sarandos wants to promote the second series of Beef. That's a series that he really cares about. He understands that it's quite hilarious that the show is called Beef and everyone's now going to be talking about the beef between Netflix and Meghan Markle. Does it really exist or not?
Yeah.
And why did Ted Sarandos, if I was Meghan Markle, this is what I would be asking, never host this type of soiree for With Love Meghan? Because he knew that it was an embarrassment and a disaster. But he also knows that part of this first look deal means that he can get his pound of flesh from Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. And guess what, Tash? He got a lot of publicity for this. And what did that publicity lead to? A lot more people speaking about the second series of Beef, a show that he actually believes in, with a star who he actually believes in Carrie Mulligan. Tash, there was another Sorry, Tash, you go.
No, I was just saying, who's actually talented, really likable. You know, she's a genuine actress.
Yeah, true. Tash, there was another scandal this week. Again, I think really overlooked because a lot of people don't want to get down into the weeds about Prince Harry's court case versus the Daily Mail. But Lauren the Insider conducted an astonishing interview with a man called Glenn Mulcair. Now, he is someone who has been totally central to the phone hacking scandal right from day dot. He was basically one of News the World's big hackers. I'm pretty sure he went to prison. He was definitely pleaded guilty for phone hacking. And anyway, he's one of these sort of poachers turned gamekeepers who was part of Prince Harry's case versus the Daily Mail. But I found his interview with Lauren so interesting, Tash, because remember, we know that other witness statements in this case have been faked or forged. The star witness made that absolutely clear during his under oath evidence. And Glenn Mulcair didn't go that far with Lauren, but he did say that the statement was drafted for him. And Tash, I don't know about you, but let's just watch this because it seemed to me like he was almost coming quite close to saying words were put into his mouth, but by Harry's legal team. But all of this is just so dark, so dirty, as I've been saying all along. Prince Harry, you lie down with the dogs, you stand up with fleas, you're literally working with criminals, and what a surprise, these criminals are now starting to turn on you. This case, no no matter what the result is, I think has been a reputational disaster for Prince Harry.
Prince Harry and all of the people that were part of that legal team, the researchers. Now, you know that Harry will wipe his hands clean if anything does come out that actually does, show pretty much criminal activity. He'll be like, I didn't know what my legal team were doing. I didn't know that David Sherborne was going to do this. I didn't know this, because that's what Harry does. He will, wash his hands, and I'm sure David Sherborne will blame it on someone else as well. But one thing that I have been certain of since following this case and everything that's come out, you've got all of the claimants, all of them, that were accusing these people of doing something, yet none of them, outside of their own feelings and some dodgy statements, none of them seem to be able to produce a single shred of evidence to back up the claims. Yes, there's stories that have been printed in the press, and they say they could have only got it if they'd broken the law and done this and bugged my home or broke into my house and that. But they didn't have any evidence to back it up. Yet the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday, A&L, they had an awful lot of evidence to prove that there had been some seriously underhanded, shady, murky dealings coming from Harry's legal team, the people that were bringing the case. I mean, forged witness statements, and what that gentleman just said as well, they wrote his statement and they put whatever narrative that they wanted in there, and then he was allowed to take things out or add things in, but they didn't actually want him changing it or being allowed to add things in. That's just got dodgy written all over it. So again, much like the other statement with Gavin Burrows, someone, it seems, forged it because they put too much in there. He obviously wasn't going to sign off on it, so someone's snuck a signature in there thinking they get away with it. It seems there's been more illegal activities going on from Harry's legal team than what the people being accused in the case have done. Yeah, shocking.
100%. Really and of course, Sherborne denies any type of illegality, but this is going to be something that plays out. I guess the one thing I would say about this case is it still doesn't mean the Mail are off the hook, because a lot of people who I do speak to, Tash, in the industry say, problem is the whole blagging thing around Chelsea Davies' flight doesn't look good. So that's the terrible thing. Harry could win on a technicality, but it doesn't mean he's won reputationally. And it doesn't mean that he walks away from this with his head held high, because actually I think you have Prince William looking at all of this, and not just that, Tash, let's just look at the whole mess of the whole week. Do you know what I mean? Australia being sued by Centre Barley. And William just looks at all of this and to bring everything full circle, Tash, says, that's why we're going to have the restraining order. We don't want you and your constant dramas and your constant messy revenge moves anywhere near our British royal family. So it's absolutely fascinating, Tash, but as ever...
The most attention-grabbing part of this discussion is the suggestion that Prince William could seek a restraining order against Prince Harry. That is an extraordinary claim because a restraining order would represent an entirely different level of family conflict. The commentator argues that Harry should be kept away from William, Catherine, and their children because of what he allegedly said and did to his brother. But we need to make something very clear. There is no evidence in the supplied material that Prince William has actually filed for a restraining order. There is no court document presented. There is no official statement from Kensington Palace. And there is no confirmed announcement that Harry has been legally prohibited from contacting William or his family. Therefore, this should be understood as commentary about a possible reaction, rather than an actual legal development. The argument behind the claim is based on the extraordinarily strained relationship between William and Harry. Harry has publicly discussed his experiences within the royal family through interviews, documentaries, podcasts, and his memoir. Those revelations have included criticism of members of his family and detailed accounts of disagreements between the brothers. For commentators who strongly criticize Harry, these disclosures are viewed as repeated betrayals. They argue that William may have concluded that rebuilding the relationship is impossible. Supporters of Harry, however, would argue that he has the right to discuss his own experiences and that his version of events deserves to be heard. That difference in perspective is one reason the brothers' relationship remains so controversial. One of the strongest statements in the discussion is the claim that William is simply done with his brother. The commentator argues that William has historically maintained a close and trusted circle and that betrayal can permanently damage those relationships. The argument is that Harry did not merely have one disagreement with William. Instead, commentators point to a long series of public disputes and revelations. But there is an important limitation. Prince William has not publicly confirmed that he has permanently ended his relationship with Harry. We can examine their public appearances, statements, and reported developments. We cannot confidently state what William privately feels unless he says so or reliable evidence establishes it. The discussion then moves toward one of the biggest questions imaginable. What happens if Prince William eventually becomes king? Some commentators predict that Harry could be excluded from William's future coronation. Others go even further, suggesting that Harry could lose royal titles or face changes to his position within the institution. These are significant claims, but they should be treated as predictions rather than announcements. A future coronation remains a future event, and there has been no official announcement confirming that Harry will be excluded from it. Nevertheless, the possibility generates enormous public interest because it would symbolize just how far the relationship between the brothers had deteriorated. A coronation is not an ordinary family gathering. It is a constitutional and ceremonial event watched by millions of people around the world. That makes the question of Harry's potential attendance particularly sensitive. If Harry were invited, commentators would inevitably analyze every interaction between him and the senior royals. If he were not invited, that decision would itself become a major international story. This is why some commentators believe William could ultimately decide that excluding Harry would reduce tension surrounding the ceremony. But again, that remains speculation. Another major argument in the discussion concerns privacy. Commentators claim that William could be concerned about anything said or done around Harry potentially becoming public later. They point to Harry's previous interviews, documentary projects, and memoir as evidence that private family matters can eventually become part of a public narrative. The discussion even references speculation surrounding whether Harry may have recorded something during a previous royal event. However, the transcript itself acknowledges that there is no way to know whether Harry was actually recording anything. A gesture involving a jacket or lapel is not evidence of a recording. This is an important example of why viral interpretations need to be treated cautiously. The commentators also argue that Meghan Markle's presence could create additional tension at future royal occasions. Their reasoning is that the Sussexes' relationship with senior members of the royal family has become so strained that simply having everyone in the same room could attract enormous media attention. Whether that would actually happen is impossible to know. Harry and Meghan have attended major royal events in the past, despite their disagreements with members of the family. At the same time, their future involvement in major royal ceremonies is ultimately a matter for the relevant authorities and family members at that time. The discussion eventually turns toward King Charles III's health. This is an extremely sensitive subject because the king's medical condition is a private matter, and public reporting about prognosis can easily become speculative. The commentators discuss cancer, treatment, and comparisons with the health history of Prince Philip. But viewers should be careful here. A person's appearance in photographs cannot reliably establish the seriousness or progression of a medical condition. Nor can commentators determine an individual's prognosis simply by comparing different illnesses. Official medical information should always take precedence over speculation. The reason Charles's health becomes relevant to this discussion is the future of the monarchy. Prince William will eventually become king, although the timing of that transition cannot be predicted simply from commentary about the king's health. That naturally raises questions about how William might approach his reign. Would he take a harder line toward family disputes? Would he attempt reconciliation? Would Harry have a role in future royal events? And would Meghan be included? These questions are fascinating, but they remain unanswered. Now we'd like to hear from you.